Hello students, today we will be dealing with the corrosion of iron. This corrosion of iron is also known as the process of rusting. When iron objects are exposed to the moist air, by the reaction they forms a brown flaky substance, and this brown flaky substance formed by the reaction of iron with moist air is termed as rust. And this process of rust formation is termed as rusting. Now, if I talk about the chemical reaction that takes place while the process of rusting, then this reaction is when this iron it is exposed to the moist air. Moist air means it will be containing some particles of water vapor, and since it's an example of air, it's going to react with air, so this air will be having some amount of oxygen. So when this iron reacts with oxygen in the presence of water vapor, by this reaction iron forms its oxide, and here the valency of iron will be 3. So it is the ferric oxide with the formula Fe2O3 with some molecules of water attached to this that can be written as XH2O. And this hydrated ferric oxide, here this hydrated term introduce or indicates the presence of water here, and ferric oxide basically is the representation or the name of Fe2O3. So this can be termed as hydrated ferric oxide, or commonly this hydrated ferric oxide is termed as rust. So this formation of hydrated ferric oxide this or rust is termed as rusting. Now as the rust formation takes place, like if I talk about this iron object, this is a iron sheet with this much width. Now as this is exposed to the moist air, the surface iron it reacts with air to form the brown flaky substance like this, and this brown flaky substance quite unstable this one is, so it will decay from the surface of iron, and as it will decay from the surface of iron it will result in the decrease in the width of this iron object. So it basically results in the loss of iron, or it is the industrial loss obviously. So this process is quite harmful, or we can say it causes the industrial loss, it causes the loss of money. Now, if I talk about the process of rusting, then in this process of rusting, iron reacts with oxygen to form the oxide of iron. That is why this rusting can be termed as oxidation of iron. In this process, the oxidation of iron object it occurs. Now, if it is asked to prove that whether the oxygen as well as the water vapor it is required for the rusting, and in the absence of any one factor the process of rusting cannot take place, then in order to prove this thing we will be performing some experiment. And here to perform this experiment I am going to take three similar size of test tubes. This one is the third test tube. And since here we are to observe the process of rusting of iron, so here to observe the phenomena, here we are putting some iron pieces or iron nails in these three test tubes. So that's the first iron nail. In the second test tube, I'm going to put or I'm going to suspend the same kind of iron nail, and so same condition I'm providing for the third one. This first test tube it is exposed to the open air, and since it is exposed to the open air, so here the presence of oxygen is with this iron nail, as well as this air may have some amount of water vapor in this. So here this iron nail has the presence or it is in the contact of water vapor also. So this first iron nail is in the contact of oxygen as well as H2O. Now, if I talk about the second condition, then I want to give only the presence of water to the second iron nail, and in order to give the presence of water to this, I am putting some water in this second test tube. Now, this water which is present in the contact of second iron nail may have some amount of oxygen dissolved in this in order to avoid the presence of oxygen gas here. Here I am using the boiled water. since this boiled water will not be having any amount of oxygen in this. But again there is a problem, since if I keep this water exposed to the open air, then the oxygen present in the air can be dissolved in this water. So in order to avoid this, or in order to prevent this, here I am going to cover this water with oil or grease. This layer of oil on the surface of this water will not allow the environmental oxygen to be dissolved in this water. And here, by this, in the second test tube, there is the presence of water only to this iron nail, and this iron nail is not in the contact of oxygen here. While in the third one, I want to give the presence of oxygen only to this iron nail. That is, I have exposed this to the open air. But again there is a problem. Since if I expose this to the open air, then this air will be having, maybe having some amount of water vapor in this. So that's why I'm using a cork here. By use of this cork, we can avoid the outer water vapor to come inside. But the air which is present inside the test tube may contain some amount of water vapor, and in order to absorb the amount of water vapor present inside, we will be using the anhydrous calcium chloride here. This anhydrous calcium chloride will absorb all the amount of water from here, and since it will absorb the amount of water vapor from here, in the third test tube there is not the presence of water vapor. So here we can see that only in the first test tube the iron nail is in the contact of oxygen as well as with water, while in the second and in the third test tube there is the lack of any one factor, either that one is oxygen or water vapor. If we if we allow these test tube to stay still for some time, after some time we will be finding that the process of rust formation, it occurs only in the first test tube. So this rusting, it occurs only in the first test tube, while in the second and in the third test tube rusting doesn't occur. So by this we can prove that for the rusting there are two essential factors required, and the one is oxygen, second one is water vapor. In the absence of any one factor, the process of rusting cannot take place. So by this we can prove that the two conditions are essential for the process of rusting. The one is presence of air, or it's the presence of oxygen, and the second one is presence of water. So that are the required conditions of rusting, but this rusting is not the useful product. That's why we try to avoid, or we try to prevent our iron object from the process of rusting. Now we will be dealing that how can we prevent the iron object from the process of rusting. So that's the next heading, prevention of rusting. Now, as I said that for the process of rusting, this iron object need the presence of oxygen as well as the water. So if by anyhow, if we make this iron object prevent in order to come in the contact of oxygen and water vapor, as it will not come in the contact of oxygen and water vapor, it will not undergo with the process of rusting. And this thing we can do by overlapping, or by applying a thin layer of paint, varnishing, or by applying a thin layer of grease on the surface of this. So if we coat the paint or the grease on the surface of this iron, it will not come, or this paint or the grease, it will not allow the water vapor to come in the contact of this iron object. And as the water vapor will not come in the contact of this iron object, this iron will not undergo the process of rusting. So this is the very first method of prevention. The second one is, if we mix this iron with some another metals, then this mixture of metals will be termed as alloy, and it should be homogeneous. So this homogeneous mixture of metals is termed as alloy, and this alloy has lesser tendency to get corroded as compared to the iron itself. So by making the alloy, by mixing the iron with another metals, we can make this resistant to the corrosion. Like if we mix this iron with chromium and nickel, then the mixture of these three metals is termed as stainless steel. And this stainless steel is more corroded, is more resistant to the corrosion as compared to the iron itself. So by making alloy, we can prevent the iron from the rusting. That is the second method of prevention. Now if I talk about the third one, so as I said initially, that in the process of rusting, iron undergoes the process of oxidation, and this oxidation is defined as the process of loss of electron. So when this iron undergoes the process of rusting, it provides its 2 electron to the oxygen, and as it's converted into Fe plus 2 or Fe plus 3, this process is called rusting. Now if we take some more reactive metal than iron, then if I take the zinc, magnesium, aluminium, then these metals are more reactive than iron. And as these are more reactive than iron, so when the reaction will take place in the presence of zinc or in the presence of aluminium, they will not allow this iron to undergo the process of oxidation. Like if I cover this iron object with a thin layer of zinc metal, so this is the covering of zinc metal on the surface of this. So since zinc is more reactive than iron, now it will undergo or it will participate in the process of oxidation. Zinc will lose its 2 electron to convert into Zn2 plus ion, and as iron is lesser reactive as compared to zinc, it will not participate in the process of oxidation. It will remain in the elemental form after the reaction also, and as it will not form its oxide, so there the rusting process will not occur. So that is the process, by which we can prevent this iron object by the rusting. And in order to prevent, if we make the covering or if we make the coating of zinc on the surface of iron, this process is termed as galvanization. Coating of zinc on the surface of iron, this process is termed as galvanization. Other than this, if I use a tin metal for the coating of iron, then the coating of tin on the surface of iron will also help in the prevention of rusting of this iron, and this method of prevention of rusting is termed as tin coating. So these are the methods in order to prevent the rusting, and since this rusting occurs in the loss of iron object, that is of quite use, that is why by using these prevention method we can save our iron object from the rusting.